buddy. How are you?
Hey, I don't think my audio's. I have a new computer and I haven't set it all up yet. How are you guys
Okay.
doing?
Can you
When'd you
hear
get a
me?
new computer?
Yesterday.
Oh, I didn't know. Usually I'm up to date on these things.
I thought I'd surprise you this time, Ryan.
All right.
Leave
That's how
it
you keep that's how you
unknown.
keep the romance alive. Is those little
That's right.
surprises.
That's right. Yeah, a little role playing. Is this okay if I just talk like this, or should I connect headphones, Dave?
I think it's going to be okay as long as I'm not hearing any feedback.
Okay.
I think it's going to be okay. It's all going to sound a little different, but I can make it all work. I think. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, man. I won't eat a bagel on the thing either.
I just had a piece of toast and it was
Okay.
really good. Yeah. No, you look good, man. This is a great looking setup you got there, Ewan. Really good.
Thanks, man. You're in New Brunswick, right?
Fredericton made the move.
Awesome,
Yeah.
buddy. That's cool. How's it feel?
It feels really good. Yeah, it feels good. I mean, I'm closer to mom. I see my mom all the time. It just made sense with the kids. It was a funny thing. Like in the back of my mind, I kept on thinking, at some point, we'll probably even I would tell my kids when they were really young, like we might move back to Fredericton someday to like prep them. And then when we were out of school for that long, and then we were here in the summer and it was really nice, we were like, maybe now's the time. Our youngest was going into kindergarten, so we just did it last summer. And like in a week, sold our house in Halifax, bought a house here.
Awesome. Plus, Nova Scotia's swarming with Ontarians now, right?
I like to say that New Brunswick's the new Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
I like that you're like you're like the guy that could say you did it first. You're like you got into the band first. You moved. You sold
That's right.
your property before everyone.
You're ahead of the
on the
curve.
ground floor, right?
I'm trying to be ahead of the curve. It's actually been really sweet to be home because I mean, obviously we got a great house, but I like being in the woods and stuff. And I've been touring, so I haven't been missing that much. Nina's job didn't change.
Yeah.
And she needed me around more. It was just getting it was apparent. So it's been great. And I see my mom every day. Like we get an exercise bike in the basement. So she was down working out and
That's great, man.
yeah, it's a good life. And I get, all of this stuff that I got going during the pandemic kind of has allowed me to make the transition without many people knowing. So
No, that's great.
yeah.
That's awesome, man.
So how are you guys been, Ewan? I haven't talked to you in a little while. Things are okay there, Bagel? Eating
Yeah,
a bagel,
man.
doing an interview?
I know it's a cardinal sin to eat on audio-based stuff. So
But we like
sorry,
to keep it
I'm-
real on Miles from Home. So you just do
I
what you
know.
gotta do.
well, I'll keep it real. I a little hungover today.
Are you?
Yeah. I drank a few whiskeys and watched Indiana Jones last night.
Was it a solo endeavor?
No, I wasn't a one. No, but I don't know. Getting drunk and watching movies, that's like the pandemic specialty.
Is it? And what Indiana Jones did you dig into?
The best one, the first one. Raiders of the Lost
Yeah,
Ark.
that's what I was gonna say. I figured that was the best one. Is that the one that they pull the heart out and it's like,
That's Temple of Doom.
oh, of course it is.
Come on, David.
It's been a long
I love
time,
the
man.
sound. The sound effect was perfect.
I've been working on that for a
yeah,
long time. I
yeah.
even have the timing right, but
Yeah.
that's
You've
the
been
only
waiting
thing
to
I got
bust
from that
out.
movie.
But
You're-
it's the one with the big boulder at the beginning, and then where he fights the big giant Nazi guy, and
Oh,
he gets
yeah,
hit
right.
by the
Yeah, yeah.
propeller, and so good.
But otherwise, how's the transition been since? I mean, I've been thinking about you guys a lot, both of you, because you're one of those bands that was constantly working for years and years and years
Mhm.
out going. So maybe we'll start with you, Ewan. Like, what was that first couple months of the pandemic when the breaks went on? Was there panic, or was it like I needed a break, or what was the feeling for you?
I think right immediately it was kind of cool. Like it felt a bit like when you're a kid and it's like, oh, school's closed today because of whatever reason. And you're like, yeah, like it was sort of like, I don't have to work or go to school. And then pretty quickly it became frustrating because it's like, man, I want to like, we were all set to make a record and then that never happened. And I was just like, man, I really want to do what I do all the time, which is make music and play live. And so then it was a period of like feeling very frustrated. And then eventually, okay, well, this isn't going anywhere. How can we spin this into something good? And then I rented a space here in Toronto and like set up all my gear that I've accumulated over the years and just started working on stuff. And we also made a record, of course, too, but like starting to kind of find the positives, I guess, the silver linings in it, and enjoying being home and actually like having a life, because basically I've spent my entire life living out of a suitcase.
It's so weird to go through that transition, sleeping in your own bed and just being like, oh my gosh, this feels good.
Yeah.
What makes you sort of almost like realize how much the things that you don't even have, or you haven't, ever really been afforded. Because I mean, we've spent our entire adult lives touring. I mean, we started this band when we were 19, and shortly thereafter started traveling. But obviously that intensified over the last 10 plus years. And when you first slow down, you kind of like are like, oh wow, this is kind of nice, because I mean, you always have that feeling that you want to like keep the hustle going. We never really have taken more than probably a month off in the last 12 years, because it's always been like, okay, what's that next thing, and what's been kind of eye-opening about the pandemic was that, I mean, so much of it, and this as well, so much of being a musician and hustling in this business is always thinking ahead. You're almost never in the moment, because you're almost always thinking, like, you're literally thinking about the drive ahead of you while you're finishing a show. It's like you're never in, and beyond that, you're thinking like 6 months, 8 months, a year down the road, what your next thing is. So we had a whole series of things all set up, and those just all literally disappeared. It's like they never happened. It's like recording an album, a tour at the Black Keys. We were, at the Junos when the whole thing got shut down. And so it's really bizarre. I mean, this too. I mean, you put out a record right as the pandemic started. It's like you have all these plans and they disappear, and it makes you kind of realize how there is a bit of a fragility to that, in the sense that it's a very weird process to go through right out of the gate. At least it was for me, because you're in one part, you're like, wow, I haven't had this time off ever. Like, I've never had this much time, and realizing like, oh wow, I don't own this thing, or wow, this place that I live in is not that great, because you're not traveling. You're like, the place that I've lived in for the last 5 years, I mean, I moved right at the beginning of the pandemic. I was like, I wouldn't have been able to handle it, because it was a place that you'd like stay for a couple weeks between tours, versus like a place where you have a home. So you realize very quickly that you're so accustomed to this different lifestyle, and it kind of is eye-opening, along with all the other emotional roller coaster parts of being in a global pandemic, I suppose.
100%. I think one thing both of you guys alluded to, which I found super interesting, was the realization that our lifestyles were really quite weird. Like, until you kind of fall back into a more staid lifestyle where you're in the same spot, and you realize, like, you just realize that idea of thinking about the next drive, thinking about the next gig. Even if you have 6 days off or 5 days off, you're ultimately in that position where you're thinking about, okay, well, I got to be ready for that flight. I can't get sick and this it'll break, all of that kind of stuff. I think that one of the big things was just realizing how bizarre the life of a touring musician actually is. And then all of a sudden you put the brakes on, you're like, oh wait, I gotta learn how to live again, like in a different way. Did you guys develop habits, like different habits, over the last year to kind of help you get through this?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I compare it to, it's a weird comparison, but I always like used to say we're like astronauts or something, where we're like, we've come back down to Earth, and I'm like, I don't know how to fit into society anymore. Like, it's kind of not a perfect analogy, but when I set up this little studio that I have, I found it was really great just to even go somewhere, kind of like a bit of a schedule, like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 kind of thing. Not exactly those hours, but having somewhere that I could like leave the house and go and do something really made for, I don't know. It just like, I was trying to do stuff in my basement, and it just didn't feel right. And having somewhere to go helped, and having something to do. I don't know. It felt like a real good investment in sort of the future, whenever that future resumes, I guess.
Because it probably won't change. You'll still use that space.
Well, the building's being torn down in November, so I don't know. But I mean, presumably I'll be back on the road, hopefully not long after then. So
yep.
It'll have served it'll have served its purpose, and then I can try and find something else, I guess. I don't know.
Kept you sane though.
Totally. And like, I mean, I often wondered, like when you're playing a touring band, you go, well, what would you do if it all disappeared? Because, it's a very kind of, I don't know, playing rock and roll music in the 2020s, who knows how long it's going to last for. So you kind of wonder, what would I do if that wasn't an option? So, maybe working in a studio would be something I would do. I'm not sure.
I found that idea actually kind of comforting, because I was terrified. I think all of us, it's a very like there's a scarcity element to our jobs. We think it can just disappear. You don't know when it's going to it's just the nature of it. That's kind of what keeps people on top of their game. I don't think it's a bad thing, but
Yeah,
at
I
the same
can't.
time, to realize that you can survive in some fashion, that there's another, there's another window, not necessarily that you don't want to go back to touring, but that you could sort yourself out was kind of refreshing, I'd imagine.
Yeah,
I
I
think
can't
there's
get back and live off my feeling good royalties or anything.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
It's a funny thing too, because I think that, you know, part of that, there's always that worry. It's like that feeling that if you're not out on tour, somebody else is out on tour and they're taking advantage of something you're not. I mean, I think that probably comes to the sense that we, all of us in this conversation here have spent a lot of time at the beginning of our career, like trying to build up to where we've made it to, and put a lot of sweat equity, and you don't want to lose that. It's like there is no job security, and it was a strange feeling to know that nobody else was doing anything at the same time. Whereas sometimes when you do take time off, you feel, when you do kind of come back down to earth, you feel that worry that like, okay, we need to get back out there. We don't want to be gone too long. We don't want to, take too long before putting out new music. And it's a strange thing, because I think that does come from that world where we felt like that for our entire career. We felt like we needed to be, even when we were, just starting out. I think we always had the mindset that once we were done one thing, you had to move on to another. And that feeling of, being a shared experience that nobody could be doing anything was kind of comforting in a way, to know that somebody else wasn't going out and doing that, because there was that kind of
100%, man. It gives you permission. I mean, it actually made me realize like how much we spend time kind of doing exactly that, comparing kind of what we do to other bands that are out there. All the posts of bands touring when they're doing good tours. The first thing you think of is like, man, I want to get out on that tour. Like we should be on that tour. You know what I mean?
They're all liars. They're like having the best time. Meanwhile, they're just like miserable in a green room, like on their Twitter or Instagram or whatever. They're lying.
Well, this is an important part of this conversation, man. I feel like part of all of these conversations have kind of alluded to that over time, is that the smoke and mirrors thing has kind of gone away to a certain extent. It will come back, but ultimately during the pandemic, hasn't been super easy for everybody. And there has been a little bit more openness to being like, this actually isn't super awesome right now, which I think is kind of refreshing, because I've thought about that a lot. Like, it's been great to have these conversations and be like, all right, the truth is that sometimes touring actually is brutal, and like hotel rooms can be really lonely places.
You can only watch so much HGTV or the Food Network or Law and Order. And I think it's like, that's the funny thing about it, is touring in an essence is a very lonely existence. I mean, you do have your bandmates and your, crew or whatever, or people that you kind of are in it with, but it is pretty lonely. So it can be one of those things. There is a lot of smoke and mirrors that go along with it. And when you're on stage and in the moment, it often is, what makes it all worth it. But that's like 90 minutes out of 22 and a half hours of the day that is a lot of like hurry up and wait or sitting around kind of thing.
For sure. Do you think when you guys go back out that something's gonna like that? Do you think there'll be certain things that you change in terms of what touring looks like, or do you think it will just be pretty much? I mean, you guys have a pretty well-oiled machine before touring. You got a good crew, you got a great band. So do you think that likely will stay quite similar, or do you think there's habits now that you've kind of developed that you're going, okay, no, I think I want to do it like this when we go back?
I don't know. I mean, I think it'll be. I mean, we're gonna do a few things this year, not like a tour per se, but next year we will, hopefully. And I don't know. I think we'll just kind of feel it out, just sort of approach it the same way. I mean, I know there's like a definite element of like, when we do lots of touring, it's obviously a lot of cool things and terrific, but like I definitely get beat down, worn out. Singing every night is really tough, and I'm like, oh, I just want to rest. And then you take touring away from me, and I'm like, oh my God, I bring it, please bring it back. Like, it's just these wild swings of like one or the other. But I'm sure like 3 days into tour, I'll be, oh God, I just want to rest again. So it's like, it's sort of like we're just swinging wildly from extremes. Like if there was like a balance where we could, maybe tour a little less or tour in like comfortable bite-sized increments. But, when you factor in all the economics of everything, touring in comfortable, spaced out things, it's expensive and doesn't make sense. And so we kind of have to hit it hard. And I mean, we're also just getting older. So we're always kind of trying to tour smarter, I guess. And we learn something every time we tour, but probably won't change that much, Ryan?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the point is that it's always a learning experience. I mean, in my case, I have to answer to the guys both as the manager and as a member of the band, so I kind of get it. I get it and try to like think as much as how we could do things better. Both economically and personally, because you also don't want to like put yourself, like Ewan said, in swinging these extremes where you absolutely hate what you're doing, because tour can be fun and can be enjoyable, but it also is one of those things where it's not, we're not at the point where we're flying on private jets. And years ago we did a tour with Kings of Leon, and they would literally fly sometimes after shows, fly home to Nashville and then fly back to join the tour the next day. Like they would sleep in their own beds. Like
Baller.
I will go out there and say, unless one of us wins the lottery, I don't think we're ever going to be at that place. So trying to find a balance between the flying home every night after a show and, sleeping in the back of a van in an alley behind a venue in Thunder Bay or something like that. Like somewhere a happy medium in between that.
Which you've done.
But I think the biggest thing is that coming out of the pandemic, I think touring smart is going to be the right thing, because I think there's going to be a lot of tours. There's going to be shows. Like you think about some of these cities, especially in Canada, where there's like one venue really that people play, and that venue is going to have shows like 7 nights a week for months and months and months. I mean, even just talking on the business side of things with people, they're like, yeah, we're going to be just flooded with people trying to catch up. So I think for us, it's going to be try not to just go out and do too much right out of the gate, because I think that will overwhelm us and overwhelm people, but also trying to do it, like you said, bite-sized pieces, and not, because I mean, when 10 years ago we were literally just like burning the candle at both ends, trying to do as many things as we could, and that's not sustainable. So we don't want that. We want to make sure that we're always putting the best product out there when we do, because it is a product. We literally are charging people money for something, so we don't want to like be tired and not wanting to be there.
Yeah, and you just don't want to burn out. Like I keep on thinking about that, especially where you guys are in it for the long haul. You're the type of band that has done it for a long time and will do it for a long time. You've developed habits, I think, from my perspective, watching you live, and I've talked to Ewan about this a bit too, is that like from a singing perspective, it's really apparent. One of my favorite things about watching you guys is it's a very energetic show. It's rock and roll, it's energetic, but there's also like this nature of like mature conservation of energy. You know what I'm saying? Like you guys are singing well. You're not completely crushing yourselves because you've learned over time that you can't do that. You know what I mean? Like when you watch older great bands, what I always admire about them is that ability to like give energy, but somehow it's like, it's like Tai Chi. It's like super directed energy. And
I make a basketball analogy. Like it was like Jordan in the 80s was like scoring 36 points a game and dunking on everybody, and then like championship Jordan in the 90s, he was like calm and just getting to his spot and working guys and to shooting the turnaround jumper and stuff. Like you're expending less energy, you're doing it smarter, you're being more efficient. I think that's kind of, if I could compare us to Michael Jordan.
I think you should. Why? I mean, don't we all? You know what I mean? Honestly, that's just like, I am such a basketball obsessive that I think it's actually part of the reasons why I watch basketball and watch Jordan growing up is exactly that. It's observing excellence. Night after night, high pressure, excellence. That's what I enjoy. That's probably why, we all enjoy it to a certain extent. There is something high pressure about the work that you guys do night after night. As you said, Ryan, like people spend money, they come to the show, they want to see something excellent. You want to deliver that. So when you see these people where it's like the pressure's on and who's going to get the ball, they want the ball. That's amazing to me.
And I always like those guys, like, remember like Dirk when he won the championship, or like, Kawhi on the Raptors, like these guys that are kind of methodical and they're just getting to their spots and they're working it. And it's not like this raw power or overwhelming athleticism. It's like this, like, I know what I'm doing. I'm smooth and calm. And like, I love that energy.
Well, they're often the ones who can have these long careers. They can have those long careers because of that. They started going literally like Roger Federer, not to switch sports, but when you move smart, you're less injury prone. It's like when I watch you guys sing, by not shouting, by not going, you can do it a fair number of nights in a row, so I think that it's really an admirable thing. It will be interesting to kind of get the wheels turning on the touring machine again. That's what I think will be really cool. How have you guys stayed connected as a band? Like, I mean, you two are in Toronto, but Sam's in Saskatchewan. Jimmy's
Mhm.
outside of Toronto, right? He's in rural
Yep.
Ontario.
Mhm.
So how do you guys stay connected?
I mean, we've been fortunate. We've had reasons to get together and been able to here and there, but I mean, in and around recording of the record, I mean, that's the longest we'd ever really been apart as a band. So that is a pretty strange thing to get back together. And we played a show for Canada Day, and then recorded an album. And we hadn't been together in the same room really at all for whatever it was, 6 months or something, like, or 4 months, 5 months, something like that. So I mean, that's a pretty bizarre thing. I mean, since then it's like, it's very strange because we are very disconnected and technically not really supposed to be getting together in a lot of places. And so we've stayed connected, obviously, just kind of like making plans and doing them and getting together to do things. But it's been very different. It's very different. Whereas, Ewan and I definitely see each other more than anybody else and stuff like that. But it's been
More
different.
than we'd like to. No,
Yeah, probably. No, but it's been very different. Like, when you're used to being around these people, I mean, it's like a family. It's like,
Oh yeah.
we're not, especially with Sam being in Saskatchewan, and we're not doing stuff all the time. It's strange because it's always was, even with us being in different cities, was effortless because we were, we didn't have to try to coordinate jamming because we were inevitably going to be playing
Yeah.
a show or doing something in the coming weeks. So it's strange to kind of make that into something you have to coordinate. So I mean, we've tried to have some online beers, and one night we all played Jackbox games together, which was maybe arguably the hardest I've ever laughed in my entire life. Like, I feel like when we have been able to do things, it's been quality over quantity, which is maybe the adverse of what we were doing beforehand.
Yeah, the
Right.
start of the pandemic, we were doing a lot of like fruitless planning, band calls where we're trying to like, okay, we could do this. What can we do? And we're just kind of spinning our tires a bit. And then it just sort of like we eased back. Like, I think once we made this record and we could kind of like know that it was coming out, it became more of like let's just connect and have fun and maybe have a beer and chat and just see what the boys are up to. I mean, it's just, I mean, these Zoom things suck, for actual real social interaction, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, so let's go to the record. Let's get into it then. So that was when did you record it? After a Canada Day show? You guys did a show and then kind of stayed together in the same spot for a little while?
Yeah, we were all staying in this hotel, like we're the only people there, which is very weird. We still had to wear our masks walking through the hotel.
What hotel? Like, where was this?
In Montreal.
Yeah, like a little boutique.
Oh, okay. Okay, in Montreal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it was almost felt sort of like I don't know, like 28 days later or something like that. It was like very like you didn't see anybody. You were in this place. It's sort of like, we would be eating dinner and I'd be scrounging around in like, back rooms of this hotel trying to find forks because, there's nobody working there was nobody working at the hotel and we were staying there. And like, it was like the hotel was all set up, but nobody was there.
No one would clean our rooms and stuff.
Whoa.
Somehow it feels really weird in a hotel. You just be like someone's got to get these beer cans out of here.
So you guys lived in like not abandoned hotel because it was obviously a nice place, but didn't have service.
No,
it was an okay place. It wasn't a nice place.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking 5 stars here,
Okay,
but it was
okay.
it was good for what it is. But it was very bizarre because the city was essentially shut down. I mean, this was in July, and in Montreal, it was a pretty dire situation in Montreal during that time. It was probably when it was the worst in Montreal for them, and
super hot.
It was super hot and just it was very like it very much felt like we were living in some sort of weird apocalyptic movie. But then the adverse of that was that it was great because there's no distractions. Like, it was never like, oh, I'm going to go to this bar. You guys want to come? And you felt like people were dividing up. Like, we would literally record all day, go back to the hotel, order dinner, drink beers, listen to music, and just like shoot the shit and have some laughs, go to bed, and do it over and over again every day. And it was like we were in this little sort of, you made this joke before, but we're in some sort of like weird rock and roll summer camp where we just like we hung out and laid around and drank beers and visited and chatted about stuff and
That's
then went and
amazing,
made
just
music
because
all
you
day.
come off these months of not seeing each other. Like,
Yeah.
did you guys get right into the studio, or did you guys ease into socialization again?
I pretty much just went for it. I mean, you know what a studio is like. It's not like you're like walking in the door and you're like working full on 100. Yeah, you're not like sitting right it down.
Count it in. One.
Yeah.
Like in some sort of like Disney Channel.
Totally.
Someone goes in to record, and the drummer's already sitting there counting in, and the person starts singing, and
or like Nashville session guys doing like 4 sessions a day, going from room to room. But it's like some of the best productive studio days I've had began with 90 minutes of bullshitting at the start of it, where you're sort of like listen to a couple of songs or you talk some trash about other friends you have or whatever. That's how you make good music, right?
And so you got into the studio. Did you? I never really, I don't really know about how the process works from a writing perspective. Are the songs? I mean, in this case, obviously, you hadn't been like working them live before you got in there. Were they songs that you had before the pandemic, or were they songs that were written kind of in those first months?
So one song we had done live for kind of a year. It was a song Seamus wrote called "Are You a Good Man?" So we knew that one pretty well. And then I think kind of maybe 3 of the other ones we were supposed to make a record in April in Portland. And so we had kind of like 12 songs that we had been having some rehearsals on. We weren't like the most prepared, but we were just kind of going to go for it because like sometimes you just see what happens kind of vibes.
Leave a little room.
Yeah. And so we ended up kind of picking a few of those, and I don't know, we just sort of like set up in a room all live, kind of circle so we can see each other and just sort of like maybe work on the arrangement a little bit in the room, and then we just kind of start doing takes.
That's how it worked. Cut it all together.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I mean, it's a funny thing because I mean, you're talking about like going right in. I mean, we had to go in and sort of remember how to play some of these songs because we didn't actually have proper rehearsals. So we did like a day where we rehearsed while the engineers sort of got the sounds started and getting volumes, and we sort of figured them out. But we would basically, it was we did it to tape, which was cool, the beds at least, and we would just kind of run the song, and we were feeling good on the song. We'd hit record and just track until we felt like we got a take to build around, and then kind of finish it like that. But it was cool. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but there was like a general kind of excitement to be back into it. So it was cool to capture that, like us all playing together. We were very much like there was this like, oh my god, like we're back doing this thing. And so that being captured on the recording is a cool thing versus sort of just piecing it together or whatever.
For 100%. That's kind of special. I think that's been really interesting. I think that is something that will come up as musicians actually get the opportunity to play together. We started the conversation by talking about like how weird the life of a touring musician is, but then there's also the comeback when you're in the same room when you're playing and you're like, wait a minute, playing music with my buds is the most fun thing ever. Like when you break it all back and you're actually doing it again after not doing it. I mean, I remember playing with Al for the first time. We had played the same thing. Especially he and I had played so much together. And I was like really emotional. I got kind of emotional because I was just like, holy smokes. Like I didn't even know if this was going to happen again to a certain extent. And it was a great feeling because I was reminded that I liked it a lot.
Yeah, and a guy like Al is like, how does he go without playing music every day? Like, he's like that's his world, right? Like,
well, and that's it. And then there was a number of months actually where he did just that. He actually didn't play, and it was devastating to me. And I
Jim and Jimmy.
know, is that
being that Al and Jim are basically they're the East Coast Central Canada equivalents of each other. It's like the same thing.
They absolutely are. Live and breathe guitar, and they're two of the best guitar players I've ever seen, and then when we all got together and get to watch them together, it's so fun because it's like we basically set them up on a date. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was the best. It was a blind date.
It was a blind date because they're a special breed of musician that has just grown up with it. That's always been what they do. They got very good at like 12, 13 when you have lots of time, and through your junior high school years, you can really master something like that. And yeah, no. So and there was a moment where Al took a bit of a break, and I thought, oh man, that's sad. Like I can't imagine him with not playing. So when we got together and he started riffing the solos again, I got like, it's like, the world needs this. You know what I mean? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm lucky enough to get it in my band, but at the same time, like even if that doesn't happen, you need to play because it's just like who you are. And
The world needs more people playing together in a room and less people playing solo sitting on the edge of their bed in front of a laptop.
100%. 100%. Or just criticizing people on Twitter about other people who suck at playing. That's really the lowest, probably the lowest form
Yeah,
of musical engagement.
Less social media, more experiences. Yeah.
So there's this vibe in the studio. You guys are going in. It's a studio that I'm familiar with. I think it's in Montreal in kind of NDG, like that side of town.
Yeah, it's called MixArt.
Right.
It's a studio that was built by Frank Marino, who was in a band called Mahogany Rush in the 60s and 70s. It's kind of like, I guess he's like Montreal's answer to Jimi Hendrix. I didn't really know much about him before this, but sort of kind of dug in a little bit more. It's like a very 70s studio, wood paneled and velvet curtains and things like that. So we've just been joking. It's like totally where people probably imagine that we record versus where we like actually have in the past. It very much has that like, vintage vibe to it, which was cool. I mean, it was a great place for us to do what we do and actually be able to do, like we said, all play in the same room. Because not every studio is necessarily set up to like with ease and distance be able to, people who haven't been in a studio. Some studios are very small and it's sort of like one small live room and one small kind of tracking room, even though like big sounding records are made in there.
Well, I love that. I mean, I recorded a Harry Belafonte tribute record there with a bunch of artists from Montreal in that room. And I remember, and that was a low volume kind of project, but I remember going in the room and being like, this is definitely one of the coolest rooms and a great sounding room. I could tell like at any volume, it would sound great. I loved that part of the room. And for you guys being a live band, be able to actually really play, that must have been pretty rad.
Yeah, we did a version of Deo there.
I didn't
Did he do Deo or was that someone else?
Oh, he did Deo. Oh, big time. Oh, yeah, that was one of many smashes.
That track slaps.
Yeah, it does. Go back to that thing, man. That thing is crazy. But yeah,
I got a Belafonte record over here.
Belafonte is one heck of an amazing person for sure.
Yeah,
amazing. But yeah, that's a great studio. What's changed over the years? Like when you think back, now you guys, let's go back to the early days just a little bit, because I want to talk about like kind of how the band has changed, not necessarily in its membership, but in the spirit of the band. Do you feel like that it's fundamentally the same feeling?
Yeah, I mean, it's dudes that love rock and roll playing their own version of it. Like, we're very, I've said this a million times, but we were dudes that were like 19 drinking beers and listening to like classic rock, whether it's Creedence or Zeppelin, and then going out to see live music and then just being like kind of let down by the options. Like it was just like, it would be like, oh, it's a band that mixes ska music and pirate chanty. I don't know, like these terrible bands, like they're just like, or like, emo bands were popular at the time, or indie rock was really having its day, and it just wasn't our sound. No offense to all the pirate ska bands.
I'm just gonna interject because I saw a great meme last night that made me laugh, but it said that ska music is the music that plays in a 13-year-old's head when they get an extra matzo stick at a restaurant. It's like, I thought that was like a great example.
Yeah, that's very much the culture we were living.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
A lot of Randy River clothing.
And so this is in Saskatchewan. You guys were in Saskatoon at this point?
Yeah.
Like for whatever reason, like the bands that would play at the bar that we would often go to, it was always these like bands that were like, they're from Calgary and they would do a whole weekend and there was always like a weird instrument in the band, like a guy with a bagpipes or a guy plays the violin with a rock.
Chapman stick.
Yeah.
And it's just like, where's the rock and roll? So that's how we started. Is we're like, okay, well, we'll play rock and roll, we'll do it. And over the years, we've just gotten like pretty good at it. I mean, we were terrible, and then a million reps and shows and everything. And like now it's like, even when we're like, I think we had a bad show, people are like, that was great, I had a great time. I think from a songwriting perspective, you know, learning to lean less on brash riffs and big energy, and like more comfortable with melody and chords and sort of the subtleties of songwriting, and just kind of everybody like settling into their like what they're good at and all that kind of stuff, and just kind of like, I guess, maturing in a way that maybe like when I think of the bands that we're inspired by, like back in the day, you know, those bands were torn apart by egos or drugs or whatever, and they didn't really get a chance to kind of grow and mature together. I mean, the Beatles did, but even they're, you know, they were pretty tested by their egos and just the overwhelming fame. But, you know, we've been a band for 17 years this year, and like really, really hitting it super hard for a little over 10 years. And it's like, we just, you know, we're still staying strong together, and we're getting to kind of reap the benefits of it because we're just maturing and that sound is developing. Who knows where we could go?
But don't you think that like part of the beauty, I've always found this, especially with bands, is that there's something in the survival and the friendship among people that becomes part of the art too. Like it's part of that experience of watching a band where you're like, yeah, look at that. Like against the odds, they're up there together after all these years, you know, because you know it's hard to stay connected as a group.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to stay unified as a group. It's hard enough as a solo performer where you have a band, you know what I'm saying? But like when you're in it together, I feel like that's something that's because of that. As you said, we've all seen bands that have to break up for whatever reason. There's something about from the audience perspective that's so great about seeing a band, because part of what you enjoy watching is that they are, you know, they're against the odds. You know what I mean? It feels like a victory, and it's almost that it exists, you know?
Well, and I think, like Ewan said, we sort of started sort of very unassumingly. Our goals when we started, you know, were just to hang out and make, you know, try playing music. I mean, this is our first band. All of, you know, Ewan, Sam, and I, when we started the band, this is the first band we ever and only real band that we, you know, sort of played in. And so, kind of starting at a point where you know, we did all, we're literally learning how to play our instruments together and coming to where we've gotten to. We've been through a lot, but you know, we know a lot of bands that, you know, have members that aren't on great terms, or like it's like they just get together because they need to play shows to make money to pay their mortgages or whatever. And I'm thankful that I mean, we still love, like, we made this record and love half the fun of making this record was the fact that we all got to hang out and just shoot the shit and drink beers. And like, that's hilariously 17 years later, that's like, we're made a record the same way that we started the band, where it was like, you know, and that's a pretty, I think, a remarkable feat, considering, you know, all the different, you know, ups and downs that you go through. I mean,
It's
being in a
amazing.
band is very much like being in a very weird sort of like dysfunctional, you know, but also it's like greater, it's a relationship that's greater than probably almost arguably any other relationship that I have, because it's like you're tied with business, you're tied with creativity and music, and you're tied with just, you know, a sort of friendship that has more ups and downs than most sort of relationships and things like that. And it's pretty unique. It's like a unique experience, and I'm thankful that we still have that. I'm thankful we still have that sort of ability to do it the same way that we did it when we started things.
It's really, it is surprising. Has it been like, do you guys have, I'm always curious about habits, right? Like I'm always curious. I love when I, you know, kind of talking about how you maintain that. Is that just by being able to kind of finish a show, or when you're working on albums, to be able to do that, be able to crack a beer together and kind of get over any, like what are some of the practices as a band that you do to keep that spirit? Because it can't always, obviously there are tense moments,
Mhm.
right?
There's no formula.
Right.
It's messy. Like it comes and goes, and we get mad at each other, and I don't know, just get over it, I guess.
Right.
I would never prescribe like some magic formula. Like, I mean, it's hard to like, look, yeah, at the core, we're guys who love rock and roll, but like, it's also a business, and there's a lot of, you know, business things to figure out all the time, which makes it really complicated. Like Ryan said, it's like kind of part marriage, part business partnership, part like, I don't know, like fraternity a little bit, because you're got this group of dudes who are always
Yeah.
doing things. Yeah, I mean, like, if you can keep the checks coming in so that people are getting paid and you can have fun, those are probably two pretty good things. And probably striking the balance between those two things helps, because that's kind of like, you know, those, I don't know, I see everything as like a spectrum, like, you know, like if there's like the business on one side and then like intrinsic satisfaction on the other, whether it's like, you know, part of that is like having fun and making music that you feel like satisfied by, and then the other side would be like paying your bills and keeping things going. So, you know, just somewhere in the middle, I guess.
Of course, yeah.
And I think some of it
comes.
comes down to expectations too, right? Like if your main goal in being in a band is to buy a $10 million mansion in LA or something like that, like how you get to that point is going to be very different. And I think because we started things so unassumingly and have kind of continued, like obviously at each point you're always challenging yourself to like go to that next level. But for us, that next level, it might be amazing to own a $10 million mansion in Los Angeles, but that's not like the reason why we do what we do.
Yeah, you did the grind. You appreciate the work, right? Like there was many years. You've had these big bumps, the Rolling Stone cover, obviously there's been bumps and people are like, oh yeah, it's because it's like, well, no, there was, how many gigs did you do before that? And then how many gigs did you do after? It's not like the grind ended with anything, right? Like once you get one of those big bumps, in fact, there's probably more expectation to hustle even harder.
Definitely. And I think the one thing is that we had so many reps it's like, you know, we had so many reps in failing at things when it didn't matter, so that we like were sort of more set up to not like try to not fail at things when the spotlight was on us, or when, you know, people were paying attention. So thankful for that. And I think that also helps with, we sort of knew how to be a band before it really mattered. So when it came to sort of navigating these things, because there's so many decisions you have to make. I mean, there's so many decisions, so many moves you have to make. It's not like there isn't like a necessarily an equation to success, because you have to continually be like fluid and pivoting and figuring out, and, you know, knowing how to operate together, knowing how to operate as a you know, individual, and all those things. So I think because we had a lot of time, so like you said, like when we've had bumps, we've sort of been somewhat ready to tackle that. Like, you know, we'd played so many shows before we started playing shows when Rolling Stone stuff happened, and we were suddenly going from playing to like, you know, 200 people to 2,000 people at a festival or more. You know, we were sort of ready to like bring it on. And while we were able to sort of already get over little fights or things like that, or disagreements we might have, because we knew we just had to go on to the next thing. And we'd kind of gone through that, you know, we'd dealt with those things, you know, in a van sleeping in an alley versus being like on a stage, and you see that a lot of times where people aren't necessarily ready to handle
man,
it.
I actually feel for bands when things move too quick, especially if they're solo artists. If it's just like, you know, we see it all the time, right? Bands that when we think that that's the best scenario, but it's how difficult is it for a band to jump through so much of that at a young age and then make it to the next stage. We're always like, oh, they were one hit wonder. Well, it's like, well, sometimes it's just a matter of timing and just like being prepared for those opportunities. You guys knew how to play.
Yeah. And I mean, an underrated thing about that year was just like how debilitating the attention and responsibility and like jet setting was. It was very, can we swear on here?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Really fucked up. Like, it just like felt, it was hard. Like, we were so busy, so you didn't have time to kind of reflect on anything. But it was very like, oh my God, I don't know how to handle this. And so like, I mean, we were 26, and if we had been 5 years younger or something, I don't know how the hell we would have handled it. I mean, I didn't have a credit card till I was 27, so that's like, you know, because I had such bad credit and everything. But like, you know, that having that time to make those mistakes on a smaller stages and to run our band and learn all these little things on small scales without that pressure was really valuable. And I just think that, you know, the experience and the reps we had, plus being a little older, you know, 26 when that
and it was still messed up, even with all that experience.
Super messed up.
Crazy, right?
But we made it out. I mean,
you made it through.
Made it through, and we're still, you know, it's all really valuable. I mean, life is messy. It's like, I don't know, like anyone who's like, I hate when people go like, I got no regrets, or I give zero fucks, and it's just like, oh, bullshit. Like, everyone's got regrets, man. Like you screw up all the time. I'm always apologizing. I'm always making mistakes. And as a band, we were just kind of like, I don't know, we just kind of try to do our best and pay attention to the music and be nice to people that come and see us. And it's kind of just been working out.
Right. I love looking at bands' careers over a long period of time where there are big moments, but sometimes those big moments are actually hard. And then you carry your fans, the fans that want to be with you, stay with you through that by that hard work, by the kind of like the quiet diligence, if you will. Like you have the big flashy moments, but ultimately it's that quiet diligence that brings people back in the door. Like your core fans, there's a huge bump, and then all of a sudden you get a bigger group of those people who then stick with you through the years. How is it? Do you find there's a lot of pressure now when you put out a new record? Like how I've enjoyed listening to the band evolve from a sonic perspective too. I think that this record is a little different. I think that the last record, because it was a big record, it was like a magnum opus. And
17 songs,
yeah, it gave you a lot of room to explore different, like the acoustic stuff, slower stuff, ballads, that kind of stuff, which I thought was really neat. And now even with this, which is an EP, 7 songs.
Six songs.
6 songs.
Yep.
You still have that variety. It's been really. How has that felt? Do you feel more free now to do what you want?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yes and no. I mean, like, I feel like every time we kind of go, okay, the record is going to be this, it never ends up being that, because you go into the studio with a plan, and then, like, I think and I struggle with this as like the producer and songwriter, is I always want it to be this, and then we get in there and it ends up here instead. I don't know, is this a visual podcast? It's just audio.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
It ends up sounding not what I had in mind. And then I fight to kind of force it into that realm in my head where I imagine it to be, when I should be comfortable letting it land in a different place, because that's who we are. That's our sound. And so you get in there and you never know what's going to happen. And that's kind of the beauty of it. And I think just like letting that happen and not trying to like throttle the album and make it be something in particular. And that's probably why Chinese Democracy took a million years to come out, is because he kept piling expectations on top of his head, and he didn't just let it, how many records were made in one day and just, they're like, we didn't have time. And everyone's like, oh, I love that record,
Right. Because it just landed wherever it landed. But you're also the type of writer and type of producer where arrangement is a big part of how you think about songs. It seems like, just knowing you, how I know you, it's like that seems to be one of your real strengths in all of the projects, and Bros too, is like this real attention to like texture and arrangement, so I can see that when you go into a situation, you have a certain idea of how it's going to feel, so it makes sense.
It's part of the writing. Is I envision the song pretty fully realized, as opposed to just like having some words and chords, which is kind of why I never like really wrote that much with anybody else. I think just because it's a different way of writing. I'm not as when I see, like, I remember when we were starting out and we'd like meet other people and I'd see them like in a green room with like a pad and a guitar, and I was like, wow, that looks cool, but like that's really not how I write.
Right. And so you bring this let's talk about that tension though of it landing into the band.
Yeah.
How do you communicate those arrangement ideas, and at what point do you start to kind of let go? I'm always interested in that, especially where you're playing that producer role as well.
Well, I struggle with communicating my ideas. I mean, back in the early days, I would be like, making the drum sounds with my mouth to Sam. He's like, and he'd be like, I don't know what you're saying. And I'd be like, and then I just kind of get flat. It was really, so I started making demos where, I would kind of like maybe play drums or badly or bass or whatever, and just kind of send them to the guys, and they could have a chance to listen to them without me getting red-faced right next to them. And then I think kind of another thing that's really important that I've been learning is like trying to consider like not just like write a song and then force Ryan or Sam or my bro or Jim not Jim because he played damn near anything, but not trying to like force my idea on them, and try to let them do a little more of what they're good at, and see the like the strengths in them, as opposed to just sort of like always imposing this idea. And it's like, well, I imagined a Carol K bass line on this, so it's got to be this. And like, you know, that's just like, again, like that maturity thing of just like, you know, I don't know, it's a perspective thing, I guess. Like it kind of pertains to the pandemic too, of like when you get past the point of being angry that you can't do your job, and then you go, okay, well, silver linings are this and this, I'm going to turn this into a positive, I guess.
That's a great way. I mean, I struggle with a similar thing, right? You kind of think, especially when you listen to lots of records. We all listen to lots and lots of records, and you're like, oh yeah, man, can you play this like whoever? And then it's like, well, and especially in a band. And I basically, you know, I have a band because it's been the same people. It's just, it's like at a certain point, it's like they do their own thing, and you kind of have to leave this space for people to. And I hear that in the recordings, and that's why I'm always, I find that impressive that it's that you write the songs, but then the band has a real character, especially live. Like, you know, your character, when I'm watching Ryan, you know, watching you sing and be such a big part of the vocal situation, that was something I didn't realize. You know, it was really cool to be like, oh wait, look at all the weapons. Like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of weapons on stage. How has it felt for you, Ryan? Like how have you, you know, on the other side? I mean, you don't have to get too real, but you know,
I'll plug my ears.
Ewan comes in and he, you know, screams at us the entire
Exactly.
time, and we say,
for a
"Okay,
while.
yes,
You
sir, yes,
suck.
sir,
Why
we'll
can't
get
you
this
play
in
like
row."
Carol K?
I put my cigarettes out on him while he's
Yeah.
doing his bass sticks. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that when I've tried to explain to people who aren't in bands what recording is like, I always sort of say that like every recording is sort of just like capturing a moment in time, and literally like you're literally capturing a moment in time, but also like each recording is a different time in every person's life, and is a different time in your journey as a player and a musician. So, you know, at that, you learn something every time and you move on to that. And I think that what was interesting with the last record that we made with Changing Colors, we did that over a really long period of time with a guy named Tom Darcy. And it was funny because he came and saw us play after we played these songs for many months, and he came and saw us play. I think it was at Massey Hall, which was like kind of a big moment for us and on a big tour, you know, with this album. And he came to me afterwards and he was like, man, why can't you play like that when you play on records? Like, which sounds very insulting, but it's just, you know, whatever. It was a
he's
conversation.
kind of a compliment.
Yeah,
to
but
it.
and I was like, kind of like, we laughed about it. And he's like, but for real, like you play these songs better like live. I wish you could play like that in the studio. And that was like a bit of an eye-opening thing, because then I think you and I talked about it afterwards. And, you know, there's a difference between how something sounds when it's just put together versus how it is once it's together. And sometimes in that case, some of the songs evolve playing live. And I think that was a lesson that we learned between the last record and this record, is that there is like a certain, like, songs sound better when they're played all together versus maybe being pieced together. And so while we do really, you know, part of the fun of making music is, like you said, like adding those textures and coming up with ideas and stuff, but the songs really do come into themselves once we sort of play them, sometimes after we put the record already out and we're playing them later. So I mean, for me, every record has been different. And, you know, some records, you know, there's been more like, this is sort of the direction we want to go, versus other records where it's a little bit more open, like Ewan said, where you sort of start at one point and it ends up as another, and you sort of figure out how to make those two things meet. So, you know, I'm not a songwriter by trade. Like, I am involved in making songs, but I knew very early on that I'm not the person in this band that is going to be write those songs. So I've relinquished that and have no qualms about feeling like, you know, there's an ego that I wish that I could write songs, so I'm going to challenge you in on it. It's like I've sort of, in a way, like always just sort of submitted to the process and then just allowed myself to inject what I can in there, rather than feeling like I need to challenge you know, Ewan on how he's doing things, you know. And that, I think, has resulted in us kind of getting better results in that.
Yeah.
But there always is times where it's like we're not seeing eye to eye. Like, he wants me to play this way, and I'm like, well, no, I don't know how to play that way, or I can't seem to grasp that. But that's part of the process, and that's how we get from an idea in Ewan's head to what the general public hears on record. And there's lots of steps in between that.
Mm-hmm.
And a good example. Sorry, Dave. Well, just that specific example is a good one. I didn't want to necessarily bring it up as soon as Ryan did. like if I get on Ryan, if I like put pressure on Ryan or whatever in the studio, or like it's not gonna help. Like it just makes me worse. It is a weird thing where like you're like a really good performer like live, and then but like the studio, if it's just you all focused down trying to nail something, it's just not a comfortable situation for you. And that's like learning about like what we're good at and what we're not. Like I don't know. Like
I think that happens in every band. I think it's very much a reality, and I've seen it playing with different musicians. It's amazing
yeah,
how that can change. But then again, it's about finding those places. Then you adapt how the recording process feels or looks, and then all of a sudden you get the best of both worlds. All of a sudden, when you're tracking it live and you're rocking, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, okay." And then as you guys for this record, right? You cut it live, and then you work on the arrange. Then you can kind of add to this bed that's kicking that everybody's rocking together. And there isn't, because I find the same way. Like I like singing, I like doing things in pieces, but I like playing live too. You
yeah.
know, we were a live band for so many years, and we had a similar thing when we would break it up. It felt like,
Will you
you know, having a
micromanage?
shower with a raincoat on.
Yeah, like a one-legged man in an ass kicking contest. You micromanage it, and it's not good. Like it's perfect, but it doesn't fit together, and it doesn't like you don't have to codify everything and have everything be perfect. Like it's good when things are kind of like those little happy accidents, and like Ryan is like if you just let him do his thing, his bass is gonna like fit with the drums way better in the room and everything. And like me just going in and trying to like make it the specific thing that I was obsessed with is like not going to help. It's also just me letting go. We're getting real philosophical here, but it's like, me letting go of like a certain egotistical nature, I think, and just like letting people be themselves and feel comfortable in a room where it's like, what are you doing, man? Like the goal is for everyone to like feel comfortable and have a good time, and like recording should be fun. And there's just been too many recording sessions where they've been like stressful and fretting over not the guitar fretting, but fretting over the end result as opposed to like enjoying the process, I guess.
Well, and ultimately you get a better result. I mean, it's kind of like human resource management, to be super nerdy, like, but ultimately it is. There's a certain amount of like letting go where you actually get much better results from the people you're working with. And also it's then it becomes the band. Then it becomes, that's part of the transition, that then it becomes a Sheepdogs record by this
Totally.
letting go. And it's hard. It's super hard.
I'm making another basketball analogy. There's
Yes.
there's a book called, I think, The Art of a Beautiful Game from about 15 years ago. And there's just different chapters. Like there's a chapter on Rodman and whatever, rebounding it. There's a chapter on Steve Nash, and they talk about his leadership, his selflessness, and like things he would do. And it was the most moving chapter of the book because he would just do all these things where like he'd throw a perfect pass to his teammate, and the teammate would miss it and it'd go out of bounds, and he would take responsibility for it and do all these things to like make his teammates like feel better. And like I was just so blown away by it because it was like so selfless, and like he's really the epitome of the like the point guard. He's sharing the love, and he's taking the blame. And
yeah. All the reason in the world. Like he could be a cocky, super self-centered guy, but again, he realizes that for the sake of the team, he still wants to win.
Yeah, I mean, he never won championships. He probably, if he shot a few more threes, he might have. But no, that's good.
But I think what's interesting about it too is that, I mean, talking about the Jordan thing, I mean, Jordan wasn't like the greatest basketball player out of the gate. He became the greatest basketball player. Like he had the skills, but he had to work to get there. It wasn't like he just innately
huge worker.
And it's really interesting when you watch that Jordan documentary, because I as a casual basketball fan didn't realize how he wasn't necessarily like, he had an allure about him, but he worked to get to where he was. And I think that if you're innately the best songwriter and don't have to work at it, you're gonna never understand how to continue to write really good songs. If you right out of the gate make a huge record and you don't really know how you got there, you're never going to be able to replicate that. And I think that we've never gone into it, while there's obviously innate abilities in what we do, we've always had to work to get to that point. And because of that, we we know at least somewhat how to kind of move forward beyond that. Whereas I think sometimes people, because they don't know how they got to a point they're at, they're unable to then move away from that. So, the ability to be able to say, like, how can we could probably make this better, or let's try to make this better, comes from a place where, I think it would be, you see that sometimes where people are really amazing, whatever, but they don't really know how they got to that point because they innately just are good at something, and as a result they don't know how to move past that.
Exactly. And we, that's where we started, which was like, how do you do it for the long term? Well, long term, it's about habits and humility and work. The kind of like the quiet diligence stuff that's ultimately kind of boring. You know what I mean? Like, it was awesome to see Jordan dunk and win, win championship after championship. But the first point is he was the first in the gym and the last to leave.
Yeah,
over
he's
and
always,
over and over.
He was a total hard work, like a gym rat, dude.
Yeah.
And like McCartney wrote a million songs because he was always working on it, and like that thing about like people always wanted to dump on McCartney, like he was the cute Beatle who wrote the silly nursery rhymes, but like he was the only guy in the 60s who was not married and didn't live outside the city, and every night he'd go out and meet like Jimi Hendrix and go to a party and be like, oh, what's this? It's a tape machine. Oh, well, I could do loops and stuff. Like he was like doing it out there, creating and expanding his mind in like practical manners, and it's inspiring.
And he still does it.
Yeah, I listened to an interview on a podcast with him recently, and he's like, I don't know, man, he's amazing. Maybe I should stop eating meat like he did, but that's a secret, maybe.
You think? I don't know. He'd tell you maybe, but I think it's pretty amazing. No, I agree. Well, I mean, it's been, I think you've made a great record. It sounds like the band. I think it's a really strong record. It's going to be a record that's going to be super fun to play live, I suspect, and hear live. It is guitar. I really, and we probably should cut this off pretty soon, but I love that you fully embraced guitar harmony on this. It's not like it's not a one. It's not like, okay, we're going to do it once. It's going to be like, again, it's the kind of speaks to the arrangement part. It's kind of cool to hear. So there are some like looser solos, a couple where Jimmy lets go, but a lot of the solos are like, no, this is part of the song. I want people to be able to like sing the guitar line because it's as important.
I love a set piece. When I was a teenage, like when I was I don't know, 14 or something, or 15, I played clarinet. Ryan played clarinet too.
That's how we met. We met playing clarinet.
No.
Yeah.
A couple of licorice stick.
Wow. Woodwind Brothers.
Yeah, that's right.
The Woodwind section.
Used to play bass in the Woodwind Brothers.
It's clarinet.
Yeah.
But my dad was this band. It was a headed band, a jazz, quintet or something, and we would do pieces, and he would always like write these like set pieces of like interplay between instruments, and it always irritated the guys that played in the group, I think, because they had to learn these set pieces instead of just improvising, over the form of the song like you do in jazz. But I always thought they were super dope because you could create these really memorable like lines, and they would have interplay. And I think that's I remember that, and like it really plays in what we do now, because like I remember when we started doing guitar harmonies, like I don't know whenever we first started doing them, but it's like it's not that hard. There's all kinds of different things you can do. And people always would be like, oh, like it was just like, it was the same with singing harmonies too, because it was like, when we started off, I was the only singer, and then Sam and Ryan like kind of found their voices, and like we started singing, and that always just like even when we were a 3-piece, we eventually became 4 and then 5, but that always, when you have everyone can sing in the band, that is just such an easy elevation beyond a band where, Bono's prancing around, just singing over top of U2 or whatever. No offense, U2 fans, but that's just the first guy that came to mind. But like a guitar harmony too, like it's a very simple thing that just elevates it beyond. I mean, we've all seen the endless blues shredding type of bands that are out there, and it's like after about 20 seconds, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, unless they're really, really amazing. And so I'd much rather have something where like, 2 guitars are playing in tandem, and it's cool and it's interesting and
deliberate
and thought out. And
I think it's really cool that there's the family element, that your dad, music arranger. That's something that I don't think everybody realizes, that there's definitely a connection there.
Well, both Sam and Ewan's dads are, their job as being musicians. I mean, Sam's dad is like a gigging musician, and you know, and Ewan's dad is a gigging musician, but also, you know, has taught music, has, you know, does classical composing and arrangement and stuff like that. So, you know, having you know, and then me and Jim, our dads are just sort of like regular dudes.
Right.
So
Right.
you know, we get a good mix of both coming
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
there,
No, it's a fascinating element, and I do agree that it elevates. I always say that like, you know, like harmonies. There's solos and then there's harmonies. Like you can impress people with a great solo, but then you sing in harmony and it hits people somewhere else. I will say that I have a theory that there's also another level, which you guys might want to think about,
Ooh.
which goes above, which is coordinated dancing. I'm not joking. I did this like show one time, and there'd be like this harmony thing. We'd be finishing. It was like this variety show for the Olympics, and there'd be like a harmony section. And I believed in harmony. I had seen the power of harmony over an audience, and the audience would be like, "Wow!" And then like 3 people would come out and do like a coordinated like Celtic dance or something, and I was like, and the crowd didn't know what to do, and I was like, "Wait, that's the next level." Like they're actually. I know I say this in jest, but I'm actually not entirely. It's the same thing when we watch Bruno Mars, right? Like we actually do respond. I'm not saying that you guys need to do this, but I do think it's like it does something when there's coordination. It's what
ZZ
it is.
Top.
It's human
Yeah, ZZ
coordination.
Top.
It's as easy, and you guys actually do it, right? Like there are moments where all it takes is the coordination of 2 guitars going to the side at a certain point. That's
Yeah,
it.
like that kind of move. Well, do you know that band Heatwave? They did Boogie Nights, like Boogie Nights.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Groove Line. That's like they were a band that were kind of like assembled, and the guy who put that band together, in the ad, he's like, must be able to sing and dance at the same time. So they'd be playing their instruments and dancing, and they're like pretty badass. It's that Rod Temperton guy who wrote Thriller,
yeah.
you know, and a million songs. But yeah,
wow. Well, I mean, Earth, Wind, and Fire is one of my favorite bands of all time. And you know, I am obsessed with that band. And you watch them and you're like, how the heck are they playing this heavy and dancing?
So are we going to expect that the next, because like every David Myles album has a bit of a theme to it. I feel like there's like a reinvention of David Myles every David Myles album cycle. So is the next one going to be your Earth, Wind, and Fire, your dance moves?
I wish, man. I need some. I don't know. It's hard to convince people to dance. Coordinated dance, like dancing on your own, is one thing, but again, it's like dancing on your own. Is like singing on your own.
But that was great. I mean, we should talk a little bit for you for a second. But when we went to that dance competition and we like decided randomly to enter you in a dance competition and make a music video, like, and then seeing you dominate a dance competition just being Dave Myles. I mean, that was a great moment. I was very thankful that I got to help coordinate that and then witness it live.
Was that after the what was it? The Jim Voskill beer drinking thing? What was that?
No, it wasn't right. It was around that time.
Oh, I thought it was that
like
night.
David, Matt, our friend Matt, who does our artwork and as well as David's artwork, was in town, and we like we wanted to make a music video for David, and I heard about a dance competition that was taking place. Like it was sort of like, it's a guy from Brooklyn that had come to Toronto to host this like kind of famous dance competition. So I proposed that David enter a dance competition and we make a music video out of it. So
I just remember the moment that it was very clear where you suggested the idea and we all knew the idea was too good to deny. And I immediately got really nervous because I knew I couldn't say no. Like I had to say, I was like, well, first of all, I love dancing. I friggin' love dancing. Always have. But it was just like, as soon as it was presented, it was like sitting so close to all of us that I was like, well, we have to. So within hours, we basically coordinated a music video. And then I felt like I had to really put everything on the floor. But yeah, it was a great night. I mean, I love dancing, I do, and I'm excited to continue to do it. But it gets harder, you know. I almost barfed at that thing because I went so hard. I was like completely exhausted.
It was a great thing, and it was great too because it's like there was such a variety of people at that, and then you doing your thing, and people were loving it. You were just getting nonstop dap from everybody over the course of that.
Well, it's about laying it on the line. Dancing's about laying it on the line. Just listening to the music and laying it on. But when they dropped the meters for my dance song, I was like, it's over, folks.
And I'm assuming on the other side of your studio, we can't see. There's a big kind of reclaimed wood with cursive "dance like no one's watching" displayed in your home as a reminder to
I was hoping that your dance was to Triumph, lay it on the line, but
Oh yeah, no. I think it was Chicken Strut. So yeah, Chicken Strut.
oh, sweet, great song. Hey, I've been sitting here trying to figure out who you look like with your sort of handsome touch of gray beard that you're rocking these days. I imagine people are telling you look like various people, but how about a little the dad from Family Ties?
Oh yeah, man.
Michael Gross.
Michael Gross. That's actually like that's really funny because he kind of was. I haven't heard that, but it's kind of like
I just googled.
He's kind of the goal, isn't he? Though, like I mean, from a parenting perspective, that's kind of like he would be when we grew up. He seemed like a pretty cool dad.
Yeah,
he was like a post hippie, kind of like raising his kid in the modern world.
Yeah, except his kid was like a hardcore Republican, and he was a Democrat.
Oh, that was the whole shtick, wasn't it?
The shtick. Yeah.
That hasn't happened yet.
Google Family Ties dad, and he's definitely got it's like a more handsome version of like Red Green or something like that.
Okay, I get Bob Saget more than that, or but the beard has changed that, I guess. So there we go, Michael.
Bob Saget, wow.
Or what's the science guy, Bill Nye?
Bill Nye.
Okay,
that's a constant one, but. Boys, thank you so much for doing this. I think we got to end it there.
Yeah,
that's good.
Congratulations
that's good,
on the new record, man. And I can't wait to see you guys live when you're touring again. And, everybody out there is listening to this. Check out the album. Check out the Sheepdogs when they come to town. Thank you so much, guys, for doing this.
Thanks,
David.
Yeah,
right on.
Appreciate it.
Take care, boys. See ya.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Sorry I was late, guys. It was a rough morning here. But...
No, you didn't have to worry about it at all. Actually, this is exactly that's why I said we'll record the whole thing, because this is how it works, and it's a great.
You know what's it's crazy about your new house, Ewan, is like the natural light makes like seeing that you're saying you're like banged up and stuff this morning. Like you look very like
you look luminous, dude.
It looks really good, and it's like I'm jealous of the natural light in your house every time we do these interviews, because I'm always like, damn it, he just.
The room itself
lit
looks
skin tone,
amazing.
and I'm in this weirdly lit office. So
it's funny because I wrote Dunlap after our conversation last night, and I was like, man, Matt, I usually wouldn't say this, but you look healthy, man. Like I was like, I've just I've had chats with him where I was like, holy smokes, and he'd be like, oh my god, I'm dying, and I'm like, oh god, they're like, you don't look healthy. And last night I was like, man, you look really healthy. And then he wrote back and he's like, it's funny because I'm actually like so unhealthy. And I went to bed at 6 a.m. And I was like, oh, well, I guess you get good light. But
he's got that weird, that time he hits like the perfectly lit, zone.
He looked great. Great.
Your like lighting zone and where you sit in your new house there is like, makes you have like a glow about you that I'm sure is not how you're feeling right now.
I'm a huge natural light indoors guy, so this main floor is really great. But this new computer too is pretty slick. It's like got a super good camera. Like, do I look more clear on it? Or?
It's actually a great camera. I bought a new computer at the beginning of the pandemic, and it didn't yet have a good, like, it was much better on my phone. It caused a bunch of issues, and that's why I ended up going to a different camera altogether. But no, that's a good. What is it? Is it a Mac?
Yeah, it's the iMac, like the new ones. Yeah.
Oh, like the big one that sits on the stand.
Yeah, but it's more like streamlined. I've been doing so much like work, like obviously these Zooms and everything, but just like even emails, and I'm like working on this like tiny laptop, and it's just driving me insane. I'm hunched over, so I was like, I'm just gonna buy it.
What color did you get?
Silver. Like all the fancy colors are completely sold.
This is my whole thing, is that like I never want to buy a computer when like the biggest choice is the color that you get. But that's like, I love that for most people, they're like, oh my god, it's a purple computer and my color's purple. This is perfect. And I'm just like, the idea of like when somebody's like, oh man, did you see those new Macs that are colors? I'm like, god damn it, when I get a phone, I don't want to like. I want a good phone, not like to try to like decide what color I want to get. So
I just get the black phone and all that kind of shit.
That's great though.
It's really nice. Like at the studio when I have I had like a Mac Mini, those David, they're like look like a big Apple TV basically, and just a big monitor. I don't know, like working on a laptop for the last 15 years, it's like, it's horrible. Like
I was doing everything on a laptop, and I tried the iMac didn't work for me, but it took me like a year to figure out that I could just get a monitor.
Yeah, that works too.
But I have a big monitor, and then I was like, oh, this is just. But it was the same thing. I mean, I'm tall. I got terrible posture, and I was just like this, and then my back just like basically stopped working when I turned 40. Like I literally hit 40 and was like couldn't move for 3 weeks. So I'm always trying to like
Coming up for
like,
me.
big monitor. What's that?
Well, I'll turn 37 this year, so it's
Oh man, okay.
getting-
I wasn't sure. I couldn't remember how old you are. That's good.
yeah.
Keep that core strong, buddy. You don't want to go down like I did.
I know, and I got a lot more weight on than you're.
Well, I don't know. Skinny guys tend to pay, I think, in the back department.
I think that's true. I think it's
Really?
Tall skinny dudes. It seems to be, and I was running a lot. I've kind of had to pay. I had to bail on the running a little bit.
We're similar heights, though, right? You're
Yeah.
like a little taller than me, maybe. Or yeah.
Yeah, but no, I'm getting there. I've just had to, you have to do these really, really boring exercises. That's the other thing, So.
Yeah, I hate exercising. Hey, your backdrop looks killer, man. That is that just in your house, or do you have a little building again, like last place?
No, it's actually in the house now.
Oh,
I wanted
great.
to build above the garage, but we couldn't because of the foundation, and so I kind of improvised and put it in here. But I soundproofed the room a bit.
Like the panels, the mustard colored.
I know, isn't that cool, man?
Amazing.
Yeah, they came out really good. It's like perfect, dude. It's got everything. I got a key. I got like other microphones here. I got my condenser here.
A little, is that Neumann or what?
Yeah.
Nice.
And so it's pretty crazy. I got a bunch of different things. So no, I'm pretty.
I just want to take a nap on that couch there behind you.
It's a super uncomfortable couch. It looks good.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's a piece of shit.
good for a backdrop. A good backdrop couch.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, right on, dudes. Thank you
Cool,
so
man.
much.
Buddy, take care, eh?
Right on. See you, man. Bye.